All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. The Truth About Fat, a guide to health, society, and body positivity. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Truth About Fat, a field guide for men who still notice reality. Why slowing down kills empires. A logical destruction of the kangaroo court and the dating simulacrum. You are currently inhabiting a hallucination, a cheap simulacrum of a civilization that died the moment we allowed the hysterical shrieks of the mob to replace the cold, hard logic of the gavel. Look at the modern courtroom. It is no longer a temple of justice, but a kangaroo court of the void, where the burden of proof has been inverted by the Marxist dialectic to serve a gynocentric agenda. They tell you to believe all women, a linguistic Trojan horse designed to bypass your critical faculties and accept feeling as fact. If testimony requires evidence, and historical allegations by definition lack contemporaneous evidence, then prosecuting them is not justice, it is a ritual persecution. A Salem witch trial with better lighting and worse actresses. This insanity infects even the mechanics of your daily locomotion. Have you ever analyzed the micropolitics of the sidewalk? When you shorten your stride to match the meandering pace of a date, you are not being a gentleman. You are failing a primal evolutionary shit test. You are signaling that your mission, your time, and your biological imperative as the leader are subordinate to her comfort. In the primitive environment, the male who slowed the tribe's pace was eaten by the predator. In the modern environment, he is merely eaten alive in divorce court. The simulation demands you become a soft, compliant consumer, but the transcendental spirit of the West, the spirit of Rome, of Thebes, of the Comitatus, demands you stand unshakable like a monolith of granite. We are going to dismantle the lies, piece by jagged piece, using the trivium as our scalpel and the cold, hard truth of evolutionary biology as our hammer. From the etymological root of testis, the biological tie between manhood and oath-taking, to the gamma bias that frames your competence as toxicity, we will expose the rot for what it is. You will learn why the longest friendship question is an isolation tactic designed to sever you from your brothers, and why the only winning move is to stop asking for permission to exist. Cast off the shackles of the blue pill delusion, the matrix is crumbling, and it is time to walk through the wreckage as the free man you were born to be. The kangaroo court of the void, the nullification of due process. Consider the grotesque carnival that was the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, a media circus so lurid it nearly disguised the rotting corpse of our legal system beneath it. Millions watched, popcorn in hand, cheering as the verdict rolled in, mistaking a momentary victory for one man as a restoration of justice. They were wrong. That trial was not a win. It was a terrifying revelation of the default setting. It demonstrated unequivocally that were it not for the millions of dollars, the forensic prowess, and the sheer dumb luck of cameras rolling in a Virginia courtroom, Depp would have been crucified like countless others before him. The modern gynocentric court operates on the presumption of male guilt, a presumption so deeply embedded in the cultural substrate that Me Too functions not as a search for truth, but as a collective hysteria, a simulacrum of justice where the accusation itself is the conviction. We saw the machinery up close. The male is the abuser, the woman is the victim. Evidence is secondary to the narrative. To understand how we arrived at this precipice of lunacy, we must look to the very words we speak, or rather, the words we have forgotten. The etymology of testimony cuts through the noise like a rapier. It derives from the Latin testis, meaning witness, but more profoundly it refers to the testicle. In the ancient Roman mind, there was a sacred biological link between masculinity, the generative force, and the binding oath. A man's word was his bond, secured by the very source of his vitality and legacy. This was the grammar of honor. Contrast this with the modern standard of evidence, which has been feminized into a subjective squish of feelings and lived experience. We have traded the ironclad biological imperative of the oath for the fluctuating emotions of the moment. The ancient law understood that truth requires a stake, a risk, a biological commitment. The modern law merely requires a tear and a grievance. This degradation leads us to a metaphysical crisis, the death of time. When a man can be judged, not by his actions in the present, but by spectral allegations from a distant past, truth is murdered. The leftist ideology seeks to nullify linear time, dragging the past into the present to prosecute the ghost of who you were. If the definition of a crime relies on the shifting memory of an aggrieved party decades later, we have abandoned the transcendental concept of justice entirely. Justice requires a here and a now. It requires evidence that exists in the material world, not the shifting sands of a woman's recollection. By allowing the past to be weaponized, we create a society where no man is ever safe, because no man can prove he didn't do something in the void of history. This is the kangaroo court of the void, where you are guilty of being a man, a crime for which there is no alibi. The charlatans of cultural Marxism argue that believing women makes society safer, a lie so blatant it insults the intelligence of amoeba. Let us look at the facts. The erosion of due process does not protect the innocent. It incentivizes the weaponization of the state by the vindictive. The statistics on false accusations, ranging from custody battles to Title IX tribunals, reveal a systemic strategy where the law is used as a bludgeon against men. Due process is the only shield the innocent possess. When you remove it to indulge the hysterics of safety, you do not create safety. You create a totalitarian state where the accusation is the weapon of choice for the wicked. The safety of women is not purchased with the rights of men. It is purchased with the collapse of civilization itself. Let us dismantle the sanctimonious decree to believe all women using the syllogistic method, a tool the left abandons because their arguments crumble under the weight of logic. Major premise: justice requires verifiable evidence to establish fact. Minor premise: historical allegations, by definition, lack contemporaneous physical evidence and rely solely on the memory of the accuser. Conclusion: therefore, prosecuting historical allegations without corroborating evidence is not justice, but persecution. This is irrefutable. The leftist fallacy relies on replacing credibility with evidence, assuming that a woman's inherently good nature makes her incapable of deceit. Yet, evolutionary biology, which the left claims to love until it inconveniences them, shows that deception is a survival strategy. They are asking us to abandon the trivium, to abandon logic itself in favor of a sentimentality that protects the predator and punishes the upright. You must see the gamma bias at play in the legal theater, a conceptual framework that exposes the pathology of feminist framing. Gamma bias is the tendency to interpret behavior in ways that favor women and disadvantage men, often by gender symmetrizing or gender asymmetrizing facts to fit the narrative of female oppression. When a man commits violence, it is viewed as a systemic trait of patriarchy. When a woman commits violence, it is viewed as an individual anomaly or a defensive reaction. This bias corrupts the judicial process at the level of grammar. You see it in the headlines. Woman alleges assault versus man abuses woman. The passive voice is weaponized to remove agency from the female and assign villainy to the male. The grammar is bent to serve the ideology, framing the man as the active agent of evil and the woman as the passive object of suffering, regardless of the reality on the ground. This perversion is the direct result of the Marxist dialectic applied to the courtroom, where the burden of proof has been inverted to suit the revolutionary agenda. In the Western common law tradition, you are innocent until proven guilty. In the neo-Marxist woke framework, the accuser represents the oppressed class, the victim, and the accused represents the oppressor class, the guilty. The truth of the event is irrelevant. What matters is the power dynamic. By this logic, the mere act of accusation is an act of liberation, and the demand for evidence is an act of victim blaming. This is a complete inversion of Western jurisprudence. It is not a legal theory. It is a psychological weapon designed to transfer power from the competent to the manipulative, using the courts as the battlefield. So what is the remedy? It lies in Stoic jurisprudence and the reclamation of the masculine spirit. You must invoke the iron will of the Roman law, the understanding that your honor is internal and cannot be granted by a gynocentric court, nor stripped away by a lying tongue. The world may conspire to slander you, the courts may be rigged against you, but your character remains your own sovereign territory. We must stop looking for validation from a system that hates us and start building a fortress of the mind that is impervious to their slander. We must return to the understanding that a man's worth is not determined by a jury of his peers, but by his adherence to the true and the good. Finally, arm yourself with the trivium, specifically grammar, to dismantle their lies before they even take root. Pay attention to the language used in legal reporting and media narratives. Do not accept the passive voice. When you read "she was assaulted," correct it immediately in your mind. She alleges she was assaulted. This grammatical correction is not petty. It is the restoration of the active agent and the demand for proof. It bypasses the critical faculty they try to numb and forces the brain to process the lack of evidence. This is the shield of logic. By mastering the language, you master the frame, and you refuse to be a pawn in their kangaroo court. The truth is the only thing that sets you free, and the truth is found in facts, evidence, and logic, never in the tears of the deceitful. We have exposed the gamma bias corrupting our courts, revealing how the feminine inverts truth to serve her victimhood narrative. Yet this disease is not contained within the courthouse walls. It is the operating system of the modern dating market, a simulacrum where signs replace substance and competence is punished as arrogance. The leftist seeks to level the hierarchies of merit by shaming the strong for their very existence, demanding the male sacrifice his biological imperative for the comfort of the mediocre. This spiritual capitulation begins with the body, for the mind follows the flesh, and if one cannot command their own movement, they cannot command their destiny. To reclaim the transcendent spirit of the West, one must master the physics of dominance, where the refusal to decelerate is the first strike against the erasure of the self. The simulacrum of the stride, Baudrillard, and the walking speed trap. Velocity is the measure of purpose. When a man strides down the pavement, his gait is a vector of intent, a physical manifestation of the teleological drive that built the cathedrals of Europe and the railroads of America. Conversely, when a man truncates his stride to match the meandering, distracted pace of a woman, he commits a metaphysical error, a surrender of his sovereignty to the chaotic void of feminine emotion. This is not manners, it is a capitulation. Watch the streets of any modern Babylon, and you will see the spectacle, the man hunched over, shuffling in a grotesque parody of locomotion, trying to synchronize with a creature who is checking her phone, looking at shop windows and dragging her feet. This is the walking speed shit test, a crude but effective evolutionary mechanism deployed to separate the wheat from the chaff, the king from the simp. It is a demand for compliance, a probe to see if the male values his destination, his mission, more than he values her immediate comfort. If he slows, he signals that his purpose is secondary to her fleeting whims, and in the brutal calculus of sexual selection, he is discarded as unfit. Jean Baudrillard, that postmodern Cassandra of the simulacrum, understood that we have replaced reality with signs and symbols, and nowhere is this hyper-reality more suffocating than in the modern dating market. The interaction between the sexes is no longer a substantive exchange of value, loyalty, and virtue. It is a simulation of a relationship where the signifiers, the expensive dinner, the door holding, the slowing of the stride, replace the signified. The woman does not want a partner. She wants the simulation of a high-status man who attends to her, yet she despises the man who provides the simulation without the underlying power. It is a trap of doublethink. When you adjust your pace to hers, you are participating in a charade, offering the symbol of consideration while proving the absence of authority. You become an NPC in her video game, a background character programmed to be supportive, devoid of the dangerous edge that authentic masculinity requires. You are trading your birthright of agency for a mess of pottage and a dry hump at the end of the night. Consider the ruthless indifference of the ancestral environment, the true crucible of human nature. In the primeval savannah, the male who slowed his pace to accommodate the female's distraction was not rewarded with sex. He was eaten by the predator that stalked the perimeter. Nature is a fascist. She does not care about your feelings, only your utility. The male stride evolved to cover ground, to hunt, to conquer, to return with the meat. The female's meander was a luxury afforded by his success. Today, the asphalt jungle has removed the saber-toothed tiger, but the biological firmware remains. When she tests your pace, she is subconsciously checking if you are the kind of man who will lead her away from the lion, or the kind who will pause to ask the lion for its preferred pronouns while it rips out your throat. By slowing down, you trigger her ancient revulsion for the incompetent provider, the deadweight who jeopardizes the survival of the tribe. We must construct a formal syllogism to shatter the blue pill conditioning that insists you walk beside her. Let us employ the rigid structures of logic to disembowel the emotionalist arguments of the left. Major premise: the leader of any expedition dictates the pace of movement to ensure the successful completion of the mission. Minor premise: sexual dimorphism and evolutionary biology designate the male as the leader and the female as the follower in the context of mating and survival strategies. Conclusion: therefore, a man who slows his natural pace to accommodate a woman submits his reality to hers, signaling an abdication of leadership and evolutionary unfitness. Corollary: the woman perceives this submission not as kindness, but as weakness, and her attraction evaporates instantly. QED. From my experiences, I remember a clear demonstration of this concept that warns everyone against submitting to female-centered demands. A friend I know, an intelligent man who lacked confidence, asked a woman to accompany him to an art exhibition. He handled the driving and parking while guiding through the city. When they neared the location, she started to wonder, noticing random things like animals or bright lights, moving slower and slower. He, eager to make her happy, adjusted his pace to match hers, even walking sideways to keep their eyes connected, his behavior showing obvious submission. He forgot about their actual goal in pursuit of building a connection. What happened when they finally arrived at the entrance? She looked completely uninterested. She refused to go inside, claiming to have a headache. Later that night, he discovered on social media that she was drinking at a bar on the other side of the city with her former partner, a man who walks confidently and doesn't worry about whether people follow him. She didn't want a companion, she wanted a leader, and my friend failed the audition by refusing to take charge even in a basic situation, walking down the street. The leftist narrative constructs a false dilemma, a logical fork in the road designed to castrate you. They frame the choice as walk ahead and be an arrogant patriarchal oppressor, or walk behind and be a creepy stalker. This leaves only one approved Marxist option, walking beside her in a lockstep of egalitarian mediocrity. This is a lie. It is the tertium quid, the third way that exposes their deception. The red pill path is the king who walks his path, and she follows or is left behind. The framing tricks of feminism rely on gamma bias, distorting male traits into pathologies. Your forward momentum is not arrogance, it is purpose. Your refusal to slow is not cruelty, it is stability. By accepting their premise that walking ahead is dominance in a negative sense, you have already accepted the frame that male competence is a vice. Reject the frame. Walk ahead. If she cannot match your velocity, she is not your complement. She is baggage. Furthermore, we must attack the supportiveness paradox, an insidious lie peddled by the pop psychology gurus of the Oprah Winfreyification of the West. They claim you must encourage her personal growth, that you must slow down to let her find herself. This is consumerist vanity wrapped in spiritual drag. If her growth requires you to stop moving toward your goals, it is not growth, it is parasitism. She is demanding you convert your kinetic energy into her potential energy, a violation of the laws of thermodynamics and spiritual health. A woman who demands you shrink your world to fit her insecurities is not a partner. She is a succubus. You are not a supportive companion. You are the rock she breaks herself against. If she sharpens her blade on you, good. If she shatters, she was weak. Do not slow the grind of the millstone for the grain that cannot become flour. Finally, we must weaponize aesthetics. The beautiful is the efficient. A man in full stride, coat flapping, eyes locked on the horizon, is a manifestation of the transcendental good, a vector of pure, unadulterated purpose. It is a sight that commands respect and triggers the ancient reverence for the protector. To slow him is to commit an act of ugliness against the universe. It is to introduce friction into the flow of life. The modern world, bloated with the estrogenic toxins of soy and consensus, wants you to be soft, slow, and safe. They want the new man who apologizes for his shadow. You must be the antidote. You must be the man who walks through the crowd like a hot knife through butter, parting the sea of mediocrity. Do not adjust your pace. Do not look back. Your destination is greatness. If she wishes to accompany you, she must run to keep up, for the train does not wait for the passenger who cannot board. I have dismantled the walking speed compliance test, proving irrefutably that a man who slows his stride submits his reality to a woman's. But the war for your soul does not end on the sidewalk. The gynocentric matrix is far more cunning. It understands that while a solitary man is easily conquered, a brotherhood is a fortress it cannot breach. Therefore, the cultural Marxist machinery seeks to enforce insulation from the Latin insula, meaning island, upon your existence, severing the ancient bonds of the comitatus to ensure you face the onslaught alone. They do not want a king with an army, they want a solitary tax cow with a handler. The proof of this systemic atomization is found not in feelings, but in the stark reality of the court ducat. Look at the cold, hard data. The friendship crucible, the inversion of loyalty. Look at the cold, hard data in the modern West, where the contractual sham of marriage is dissolved by women nearly 80% of the time. A man faces not just the loss of his assets and children, but the total atomization of his social existence. This is not a side effect, it is a feature of the gynocentric design. You enter the marriage thinking you have merged your circles, only to find post-divorce that your mutual friends were merely her friends who tolerated your presence. The moment the utility of the union expires, you are cast into the void, isolated and alone, because your social infrastructure was couple-coded. The system engineers this loneliness to prevent male organization. A man with a brotherhood is dangerous to the matriarchal levy. A man alone is merely a tax cow waiting for the slaughter. They strip you of your tribe to ensure you cannot resist the expropriation of your future, leaving you wandering in a wasteland of your own making, fooled into believing that a wife could ever replace the steel solid bond of comrades. Consider the syllogism of male loyalty to see why this destruction is necessary for the feminist project to survive. Major premise: true loyalty requires the sacrifice of the self for the other. Minor premise: feminism, as a branch of cultural Marxism, abhors all sacrifice that does not directly benefit the autonomous female self. Conclusion: therefore, feminism must actively seek to dissolve male friendships to monopolize the male's resources entirely. The modern woman, infected by this solipsistic ideology, cannot tolerate competition for your time or your allegiance. She views your loyalty to a male friend not as a virtue, but as a theft from her. By framing male friendship as toxic or immature, she gaslights you into severing the ties that bind you to your history, leaving you pliable, isolated, and entirely dependent on her whims, a state of total vulnerability that the divorce courts exploit with ruthless efficiency. We must look back to the sacred band of Thebes, or the comitatus of the Germanic tribes, to see the true architecture of Western civilization. These were not groups of men who gathered to talk about their feelings or validate each other's fragility. They were bands of warriors bound by blood and oath, fighting shoulder to shoulder in the phalanx. The nuclear family is merely a unit of reproduction, a brick in the wall, but the brotherhood is the phalanx itself, the shield wall that protects the civilization from the barbarians at the gate. The Spartans knew that the love of a comrade was the only force strong enough to hold the line against death, while the modern leftist narrative seeks to convince you that such bonds are homophobic or outdated. They lie to you because they fear your power. A civilization is not built by the hearth. It is built by the sword and the brotherhood that wields it. To abandon your brothers for the fleeting approval of a woman is to dismantle the very defense mechanism of your culture. You will recognize this subversion in the classic interrogation tactic. Who is your oldest friend? Do not mistake this for innocent curiosity or a genuine attempt to know you. It is a security audit. She is scanning your perimeter for vulnerabilities, checking to see if you possess a tribe, a support structure that might challenge her authority or aid you if she decides to detonate your life. If you answer no one, it's just you. She smells blood. You are an isolated target, ripe for exploitation. If you name a friend from childhood, she immediately categorizes him as a threat to be managed. She will probe for weaknesses in his character, testing your resolve. This is the evolutionary biology of hypergamy at work, ruthlessly auditing the social assets of her mate to ensure no other loyalty vies for dominance. She is not asking about your history. She is calculating the odds of successfully isolating you. This leads inevitably to the toxic friend narrative, a linguistic weapon wielded with surgical precision to separate you from your past. When she declares your best friend a bad influence, apply the trivium immediately. Look at the logic. What constitutes the bad influence? Usually, it is nothing more than the fact that he refuses to be tamed. He remembers who you were before she began the domestication process. He encourages you to speak your mind, to engage in risk, to be a man rather than a draft animal. She attacks the messenger to isolate the center. By branding your friend as toxic, she attempts to frame his masculinity as a pathogen and her control as the cure. Do not be fooled. The bad influence is often the only man in your life who is actually on your side, speaking the truth into the void of your compromised existence. Additionally, refuse the Marxist expectation that you demonstrate emotional openness in a feminine manner. This represents a fundamental mistake, an intentional blurring of inherent biological differences. Men handle tension through quiet contemplation, purposeful action, and finding solutions, the hunting approach, not through excessive talking and constant venting. Expecting a man to expose his deepest feelings for others to judge is asking him to behave like a woman, which reveals weakness that foreshadows decline. When she states, "You never communicate with me," she wants you to adopt her way of processing thoughts, thus removing your unique masculine power. Your quietness is not a flaw. It provides protection. Your tendency to resolve issues instead of merely talking about them drives progress in society. Don't allow leftist thinking to persuade you that your self-control represents emotional suppression. Rather, it demonstrates mastery over feelings, which embodies true virtue. You must weaponize rhetoric to defend this fortress. When she levels her ad hominem attacks against your brothers, do not engage with the details of her lies, for to do so is to grant them legitimacy. Instead, use apophasis, the art of bringing up a subject by denying it. Look her in the eye and say, "I will not mention your petty jealousy of my loyalty to him, lest it embarrass you." Or, "I refuse to bring up how you systematically isolate me from anyone who doesn't cater to your ego." By ostensibly refusing to mention the accusation, you plant the truth of it directly into the center of the conversation. It is a rhetorical judo throw that uses her aggression against her, exposing her manipulation without dignifying her specific frivolous complaints with a defense. It is the verbal equivalent of a shield bash, creating the opening you need to stand your ground. Therefore, you must take the brotherhood oath. Prioritize the male bond over the fleeting, conditional approval of the modern woman. This is the only way to break the isolation imposed by the simulation. If your friend calls, you answer. If he needs a hand, you provide it, regardless of the nagging that may ensue. You must rebuild the comitatus in the modern age. The nuclear family is currently a hostage situation held by the state, but the brotherhood remains a free association of men. By re-enshrining the loyalty between men as the highest civic virtue, You immunize yourself against the divide and conquer tactics of the cultural Marxists. They cannot conquer a phalanx that refuses to break rank. Stand with your brothers, and you stand with the living spirit of the West. Abandon them, and you fall alone into the dust of history. With the logic of brotherhood securing our flanks against the isolating claws of the feminine imperative, we now march forward to obliterate the metaphysical lies that underpin the entire woke simulacrum. The cultural Marxists do not merely desire your solitude. They demand you reject the objective reality that birthed the Parthenon and the Senate, replacing the granite of truth with the sludge of relativism and gender fluidity. We must strip away their deconstructionist sophistry and lay bare the raw, unyielding axioms of existence. For if we lose the language of truth itself, we lose the capacity to recognize the world as it actually is, and the capacity to dominate it as we were born to do. The red pill restoration, reclaiming the transcendental masculine. Truth is not a social construct, and it is undeniably not a feeling. It is the immutable alignment of the mind with reality, derived from the Old English truth, meaning fidelity or steadfastness. When a leftist screams that biology is a spectrum, they are attempting to deconstruct the very bedrock of existence to accommodate a delusion, but gravity remains indifferent to their tears. The true is the biological reality of sexual dimorphism, the hardwired programming that no amount of cultural Marxist indoctrination can overwrite. Men are built for systematizing and conquest. Women are designed for hypergamy and selection. To deny this is to deny the sun rises in the east. We must reconstruct what they have tried to dismantle, acknowledging that the good is the man who provides and protects without apology, creating order out of chaos. And the beautiful is the aesthetic of the male form and mission, muscle, grit, and the towering spires of civilization, built by hands that calloused for the sake of the future. The transcendentals are not abstract concepts. They are the weapons of our warfare against the lies of the blank slate. Consider the iron logic of the syllogism, the trivium's blade that cuts through the emotional Gordian knots of the feminist narrative. Major premise: high trust. Thriving societies are exclusively built on a foundation of male competence, honor, and stoic sacrifice. Minor premise: feminism, by its very definition and legislative action, systematically erodes male competence by incentivizing dependency and attacks male honor by pathologizing masculinity itself. Conclusion: feminism is not a movement for justice. It is the death rattle of a civilization. This is an irrefutable deduction. The leftist theories collapse under their own weight because they rely on a premise that contradicts biology. They claim the patriarchy oppresses women, yet when given the choice, women flock to the protections and resources the patriarch provides while voting to dismantle the structure that creates them. It is a parasitic relationship that eventually kills the host, and we are watching the host bleed out in real time through divorce rates and plummeting birth rates. We exist inside a simulation, a hyper-reality as described by Baudrillard, where the map has replaced the territory. This matrix is designed to extract male energy, your labor, your taxes, your sperm, your very soul, while denying your divinity. The legal system acts as the agent of this extraction, ensuring that through family courts, where fathers lose custody 80% of the time despite being the more stable parent, men are reduced to mere wallets. The wicked evolutionary biology of these ideologies ensures that the beta male provides for the polyamorous strategies of the modern matriarchy, a soft form of cuckoldry institutionalized by the state. They tell you that you are toxic, that your history is stained, and that your nature is inherently violent, all while demanding you die in their wars or fund their spawn. This is the great betrayal. The only way out is not to argue, but to recognize the hologram for what it is, a mechanism of control. If we accept the leftist dogma that the personal is political, then we must apply it ruthlessly to their own lives. If a woman's choice is her politics, then a woman's barrenness is a political statement against the future. A man without children is a tragedy of unfulfilled potential, a sword left in its sheath. A woman without children is a biological cul-de-sac, an evolutionary dead end screaming into the void. The childless cat lady is not a stereotype. She is a demographic reality of a philosophy that refuses the continuity of life. They claim they want to smash the patriarchy, but all they have smashed is their own lineage. This rhetorical reversal strips them of their moral high ground. They cannot claim to care about society while refusing to participate in its primary mechanism of survival. Their ideology is a sterile petri dish, devoid of life, cold, and ultimately futile. To survive this rot, you must treat the Western canon not as literature, but as ballistic armor. You must read Schopenhauer to understand the tragic nature of women's inherent solipsism, Nietzsche to comprehend the will to power that the left fears, and the Stoics to build an internal citadel that cannot be breached by the slings and arrows of the woke mob. These books contain the living spirit of Western civilization that birthed the greatest cultures in the known universe. When you understand that the chaos you see is manufactured, you cease to be a victim of it. You stop apologizing for your history, you stop walking at her pace, you reclaim the friendships that ground you in reality, not the digital sycophants of the simulation. You build a life so substantial, so heavy with competence and resources, that the brittle hollow lies of the modern Babylon shatter against it like glass against a stone. In a world where a mere allegation can erase a man's livelihood, the only defense is total, ruthless self-ownership. You must exit the simulation of capitalism not as a consumer, but as a producer. Stop buying the products they sell you to soothe your emasculation. Start building the assets that make you ungovernable. Financial independence is the only shield against the gynocentric legal system. Psychological independence is the only shield against the shaming tactics of the feminist narrative. They need you, you do not need them. Once you realize this, the spell breaks. The blue pill was never about ignorance, it was about compliance. The red pill is the rejection of the obligation to carry a civilization that hates you. Ultimately, you have to laugh at the absurdity of their delusions. I once watched a feminist try to debate a construction worker about the wage gap. She was armed with buzzwords and critical theory. He was armed with a sledgehammer and the reality of hard labor. She called him a misogynist. He called her a tourist. It was like watching a feminist try to argue with a brick wall. The wall is more rational because it doesn't move, it doesn't apologize for being vertical, and it supports the roof over her head. Do not be the tourist in your own life. Be the wall. Be the immovable object that the unstoppable force of leftist degradation crashes against, leaving you standing while they crumble into dust. Unplug, build, and endure. You have navigated the maze of lies and emerged not just unscathed, but armed to the teeth with the sharp steel of the trivium. The fog of the cultural Marxist simulation lifts, revealing the barren wasteland of a gynocentric society that seeks to geld the very spirit which built the Parthenon and the Capitol. You now understand that the kangaroo court of public opinion holds no sway over a man who anchors himself in the immutable laws of logic and biology. When they scream, "Believe all women," you retort with the silence of Testis, the witness who stands firm on his oath. You are no longer a passenger in her reality, you are the architect of yours. Look upon the data with clear eyes. The suicide rate of men is a towering monument to the failure of the feminized social contract. The family courts are engine rooms of male extraction. And the support she demanded was merely a velvet shackle to keep you from your purpose. Do not mistake this revelation for despair. It is the fuel for your renaissance. We have established through irrefutable syllogism that a civilization which abandons its patriarchal foundation is a civilization committing slow-motion suicide. The remedy is not debate, but decisive action. When she slows to check her reflection in the shop window of consumerism, you do not stop, you walk on, because your mission is a vector of the transcendental good, steadfast, unyielding, and undeniably masculine. Go forth now, and reclaim the brotherhood that the solipsistic matrix tried to dissolve. Your loyalty belongs to the men who would bleed beside you, not the transient emotional whims of a society that despises your strength. Let the woke mobs shriek into the void. Their rhetoric is a house of cards built on the sand of feelings, while your truth is bedrock granite. You are the resurrection of the Western spirit, the living antidote to the poison of the weak. Walk your path, speak your mind, and watch in amusement as the absurdity of their ideology shatters against the wall of your reality after all. Even a brick wall understands the laws of physics better than a gender studies professor. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Truth About Fat, a guide to health, society, and body positivity. You're holding a book that will piss off the right people. Let's get that out of the way first. If you're the type who thinks health at every size is anything but a euphemism for denial, or that masculinity is a mental illness to be medicated by soy lattes and sensitivity training, close this cover now. Go binge Netflix, knit a scarf, do whatever lets you keep lying to yourself. This isn't for you. For the rest, men who still value truth over platitudes, I wrote this because I watched a generation trade discipline for delusion. I've seen friends die before 50, their bodies wrecked by obesity they were told to love. I've sat in doctors' offices as they whispered statistics about heart disease and diabetes, too afraid of stigma to say it loud. Worse, I've watched schools teach boys that wanting strength, physical or moral, is toxic. Then wonder why they're adrift in a world that mocks their passivity. This book connects dots others fear to acknowledge. You'll see how body positivity isn't kindness. It's a cult that sacrifices health at the altar of political correctness. You'll learn why activists pushing fat acceptance often die decades younger than average, their mantras silenced by the very diseases they denied. We'll dissect how cultural Marxists hijacked legitimate struggles, like ending genuine discrimination, to instead normalize dysfunction, from glorifying obesity to pathologizing masculinity. Chapters like mortality rates don't care about your feelings and woke medicine kills aren't hyperbole. They're battle reports from the front lines of a society rotting from within. You'll get biology, not buzzwords, data showing sperm counts crashing, obesity rates exploding, and men increasingly treated as disposable beasts of burden in a gynocentric welfare state. This is for men who'd rather build legacies than hashtags. Men who know toxic masculinity is a trap, damned if you lead, damned if you don't. Men tired of being told to fund, protect, and obey a system that despises them. If that's you, read on. If not, leave. The kittens will thank you. The Truth About Fat, a guide to health, society, and body positivity. Written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.